Hello, good morning. Welcome to Helen Buster's Backstage. Hi, Chuya.
Hey,
Good morning.
Morning. Good to see you.
Good to
You look
see
so
you
nice
too.
today. I love
Thank
your
you.
pin, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. So, it's related to today's topic. So, as you may know, a couple days ago, we have 3 Chinese astronauts just came back to the Earth from their trip to the universe. And in October, we will have another 3 astronauts going to space.
Yeah.
And this time we may have a female astronaut on board.
That's right.
Yeah. So I want to ask you, if you got a chance to go to space, what would you like to bring with you? And what would you like to do over there?
Oh, my dog. I've got a husky at home. He's my baby. He's 13 years old. I know it's not a little bit far-fetched from now, but who knows, right? Space travel, space tourism for commercial sectors is already becoming, possible. So who knows? We might be able to bring our pets up to space.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'm
I
such
like
a space fan. I really hope that I do get to travel to space one time.
Okay, cool. So I also brought this badge today. It's the souvenir special made for Helen Buster last year.
Nice.
So I wanna explain the concept of our design
Sure.
very quickly. So you can see cities here, and you can see the moon.
Oh, that's the moon?
Yeah.
I thought that was Earth.
So basically, it means we want Helen Buster go to the whole world and maybe even the universe.
Wow.
Yeah, so I think maybe you can do a Helen Buster show in the universe in spaceship.
One day.
Live
Yeah.
streaming.
Oh, that'll be exciting.
Yeah. So, okay, cool. I'll save this for you and
Thank
good
you.
luck with the show.
Yay. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good luck with the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome to Headline Buster, brought to you by The Point. I'm Li Qiuyuan, sitting in for Liu Xin. In this series, we dissect stories that are making headlines around the world and talk to our guests to compensate for the missing pieces of the puzzle. So join us in real time by sending us your comments or questions via the CGTN page on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, or Weibo. If you're watching this live on the CGTN app, email us at thepointwithLX@cgtn.com. Let us know what you think. We air Headline Buster on Fridays at 11 a.m. Beijing time, and do get in touch, and we might just read out your comments. This week, we are talking about a major milestone for China's space program and an inspiring story for anyone interested in galaxies beyond on our Shenzhou 12. China's manned space mission successfully returned to Earth on September 17th after 90 days in space, the longest stay in space for a single flight mission for Chinese astronauts so far. And the first manned mission in almost 5 years. Just 3 days after the Shenzhou 12 astronauts returned to Earth, China launched the cargo spaceship Tianzhou 3 to deliver supplies to the space station. Now, the 3 astronauts on board, Mission Commander Nie Haisheng and his fellow crew members Liu Boming and Tang Hongbo, landed in the designated location in China's Gobi Desert. They were quickly confirmed to be in good physical and mental conditions. So, how is the mission covered in the media? As something to celebrate or to fear? Or just another trip to space in an increasingly crowded field? Well, first, let's talk about what the 3 months completed. What makes it so significant and how it fits into China's rapidly growing space program? Now, the Shenzhou 12 mission is part of the efforts to build what will become China's first low-Earth orbital space station called Tiangong, or Heavenly Palace, before the end of 2022. Orbiting Earth at a height of about 400 kilometers, China's space station is still under construction. And during this mission, the astronauts conducted tests, performed maintenance, went on spacewalks, sorted supplies for upcoming crewed missions, not to mention snapping some really incredible photos of the Earth, which have already gone viral on social media platforms. Now, building the space station is one of China's most complicated space missions. And to complete the project, 2 more modules, Wentian and Mengtian, will also be sent up next year. Several more cargo and manned missions are in the works as well. The next manned flight, set to carry another 3 astronauts who will live and work in orbit for an even longer stay of 6 months, is scheduled to be launched in early October. And in 2022, 6 more missions are still being arranged to complete the space station. Once completed, China's space station will be about a quarter of the size of the International Space Station, or the ISS, which was built by a coalition of countries. Speaking of the ISS, it's worth noting that the Shenzhou 12 astronauts entered the space station's core module more than 20 years after the ISS was launched. The ISS consists of Canada, Japan, Russia, the United States, and 11 member states of the European Space Agency. Chinese astronauts, however, are not allowed on board because of a U.S. law banning NASA from working with their Chinese counterparts. However, there are signs that perceived competition might bring some change. At a space symposium in August of this year, NASA Administrator Bill Nelson said, quote, "I would like, speaking on behalf of the United States, for China to become a partner," drawing an apology to cooperation between the United States and the former Soviet Union in space during the Cold War. That said, collaboration, inclusiveness, and openness have always been the hallmarks of China's space program. Now, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian reiterated these principles at a press conference on September 17th, held after Shenzhou 12's crew returned. Take a listen of what he has said.
探索宇宙是全人类共同的事业。
Exploring space is a common cause of mankind. China has always been committed to the peaceful, equal, and mutually beneficial co-development of space, seeking engagement in international cooperation in the field.
So, how are the media covering the news about Shenzhou 12's return to Earth and about China's space program in general? Well, actually, there's a lot of neutral, if not inspiring, coverage on the return of Shenzhou 12. For example, the South China Morning Post published this headline: China's Tiangong astronauts return with a vision of new heights in space travel. Their journey completes another milestone in China's ambitious space program. The article covered the logistics of the landing, but it also gave a more human angle by including the Chinese proverb that Commander Ni Haisheng quoted in an interview, that real gold fears no fire. Or that one of the astronauts, Liu Boming, who turned 55 on Friday, said that this was the most unforgettable birthday of his life. The universe is vast and beautiful, and it is fascinating to fly to the sky. Taking a spacewalk on our space station in China is my fortune, giving me great happiness. But the article also offered some insights into Chinese social media that perhaps people living outside of China won't be aware of, like this part. The astronauts' safe return to Earth was the top trending topic on Chinese microblogging platform Weibo, with 290 million hits in the first half hour after landing. Thousands of people posted messages of support, welcoming back the country's 3 space heroes. Indeed, plenty of headlines also cover the landing of Inspiration 4, the first private, all-civilian team ever to orbit the Earth, illustrating the growing influence of the private sector in space exploration. The amount of attention paid to the private expedition, part of Tesla billionaire Elon Musk's ambitions in space, compared to China's mission, makes you think about the direction that space exploration is now heading. So, how should we look at the relationship between the private sector and government-sponsored space exploration programs? What kind of international collaboration can we expect from each? And what does China's space program mean for the rest of the world? We'll talk about it with my guests after a quick break. Don't go away.
Here on Earth, an apple will fall due to gravity's influence, but in outer space, it floats like this. But how might this apple mutate in a microgravity environment? What might happen when an astronaut eats this apple? China has sent 11 astronauts into space since 2003. During their time in space, the astronauts had carried out a variety of experiments, but their time for each visit was limited. China is aiming to remedy this by building a brand new space station by the end of 2022, which is expected to remain in space for over 10 years. allowing astronauts who spend time there to engage in longer physical, biological, and cosmological experiments. As for experiments, Chinese scientists are interested in growing plants. These flowers and vegetables were growing from seeds mutated in space. The effects of living in space are also of concern for scientists. Knowing how to guarantee the ability for astronauts to have a healthy long-term stay in space could pave the way for future space travel. China's new space station won't just be for Chinese scientists, but also for global scientists as well. So far, a total of 9 projects proposed by 17 countries, including Germany, France, and Italy, have been selected for the first round of experiments to be conducted in this new space lab. This new facility is expected to open up a brand new chapter in human space exploration.
Welcome back to Headline Buster, brought to you by The Point. Today we're talking about China's space program. And before we get to our discussion, let me introduce my awesome panel today. So we've got Professor Quentin Parker joining us from Hong Kong. He's the director of the Laboratory for Space Research, member Academic Senate, University of Hong Kong. And also we've got Professor Yang Guang, professor at China Aerospace Science and Industry Corp. He is joining us from Beijing. Last but not least, we've got Professor Rick Dunham from Tsinghua University, joining us from Washington, D.C. Great to have all of you with us. So let's talk about this. We've got a lot happening in the past couple of days. We've got the return of Shenzhou 12 mission, and we also see the successful launch of Tianzhou 3 cargo mission, setting the stage for the next manned mission in October. Let me start with you, Professor Parker. What do the successful and safe completions of these missions say to you about China's space program at this stage?
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you all. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I think there are 3 things that really strike me. And I think the first thing is how successful this entire venture has been. And the second is how impactful it has been, just as you said, to the general population, the engagement of the people in getting on board the excitement of these incredible space missions. And 3, I think it points very clearly to the future of what the capacity that China's developed is bringing to a spacefaring world. And the other thing I would just like to say as a point 4 is that although there's all this incredible excitement around the manned space projects of China, don't forget this is in the context of an incredibly successful series of missions to the moon, with the Chang'e 4 and 5 missions recently that brought back moon rock, only the 3rd country ever to do so, and also the incredible success of the Mars rover as well, where China has been the only other country really to put a rover on the moon and did it first time. So I think these are incredibly impressive to me as an astrophysicist and space scientist, looking at these achievements coming in very quick succession, with this latest manned space mission of 3 months to the brand new, spanking new, wonderful Chinese space station, just being the last in the whole series of impressive achievements.
Yeah, the moon mission, the Mars mission, the manned space mission, a lot has been happening for China's space program. Professor Yang, let me bring you into this. How significant are these achievements we've talked about in terms of China's space program?
Well, as you mentioned, it is really a milestone for China Aerospace and for China's manned space program. You know that we've already mastered most essential technologies for the constructing and operating of a station, but not all the technologies. So the Shenzhou 12 and Shenzhou 13 mission, together with the Tianzhou 2 and the Tianzhou 3 cargo ship, will be very essential, very critical for China's space station program, because you know that there are still some technologies we need to verify and demonstrate on the outer space. For instance, the long-term residence of astronauts in space, the regenerative life support system, and the long-duration EVA, and also other very complex operations, especially the operation of the robotic arm. So these are very important technologies necessary for our future operation and also maintenance of the station. So this time, the successful completion of the Shenzhou 12 mission is very good news for us, and also the Tianzhou 3 has made a great very good preparation for the 13 mission for the six months residence in space.
But Professor Dunham, what sets China's space program apart from others? For example, the U.S. or Russia's?
Well, right now it's money. I mean, the Chinese government is fully committed to funding this space effort and trying to break through. Whereas in the United States, the space budget is very small, a much smaller percentage of the federal budget, and much more is being spent by private corporations. So I think that's one of the big things. And the second, I would say, is just a commitment to excellence and a commitment to achievement, not just talking, but actually doing and accomplishing things and moving forward with the game plan, the missions that have been set out by the Chinese Space Agency.
Now, there is an interesting thing that the U.S. has brought up, this concern over the use of robotic arm. They pointed out that China's robotic arm on a space station might be used for military use, for example, grappling other satellites. Professor Yang, is that even possible? And what will be China's, space station's robotic arm be used for?
So that opinion is really ridiculous. You see that our station orbiting the Earth in a very special orbit with the inclination 41.2 degrees and with the altitude about 400 kilometers. So only other spacecraft approaching our King Moon space station they have some physical contact with the robotic arm. On the other hand, you see that the United States have used the robotic arm in many peaceful purposes. For instance, the first commercial launch of China in 1990, we launched the Asia Satellite 1, which made by the Hughes company of the United States. The satellite is just grabbed by the robotic arm of the space shuttle back from Earth. The former name of the satellite is named West Star 6. So this is a very typical peaceful usage. And in the future, you know that the robotic arm plays a very important role in the construction, in the maintenance, repairing, and also the scientific research of our space station. And of course, it will be in a very purely peaceful usage.
Professor Parker, how do you look at these concerns from the United States?
I share the incredulity of the previous speaker. I mean, frankly, a robotic arm is an arm to use to manipulate and maneuver items in space, but they have to be associated and close to the actual space station. It's not like the space station is going to be able to go roving around space, hunting down rogue satellites and capturing them and stealing their technology. I mean, that's just completely implausible on so many different levels. It's not even worth considering as a serious suggestion. So obviously, I'm not sure why they would say such ridiculous things, but clearly a robotic arm like the one on the space shuttle and the one on the International Space Station are purely there for practical reasons to do with maneuvering things around the space station from time to time, and including, with the Chinese space station, the Chinese Space Station telescope, which is going to be an amazing piece of kit like the Hubble Space Telescope, which will be able to be docked with the space station and maneuvered and repaired. For the HST, the Hubble Space Telescope, you needed a special shuttle mission to repair it. Here, the Chinese Space Station telescope is going to be associated and quite close to the Chinese Space Station itself. This gives a tremendous opportunity to upgrade, to repair, and to look after it. And the robotic arm will play a role there, I believe. So this is purely practical, commercial and peaceful usage of this. And there's no military connotation there whatsoever, because it's actually not practical, even if you wanted to do it. It's just not possible.
It's just not possible. Professor Dunham, how are you looking at this? A ridiculous assumption. Your thoughts? Do you agree with what's been said here?
My thoughts are that I think we have to put it in context. This was one person speaking. It wasn't the position of the U.S. government. And yeah, I think that there are some people in the U.S. who look for sort of a Cold War mindset on anything that has to do with China's development, I mean, particularly technological development. And I think that there are some who see this as a race, as a second Sputnik, a second race to the moon, a race back to the moon. And it's going to be very hard to convince them to think otherwise. So, I mean, I think that we can't take too seriously every nationalistic comment that there is. But I do think that there will be competition. And in fact, I think some people in the space community in the US are trying to talk up the competition because they want more government funding. And unless the Congress decides that, well, China might beat us back to the moon, that Congress will not give the sufficient funding for NASA to go forward. So I think some of it is political theater, and some of it is just individual nationalistic people in the U.S.
We have to mention that this comment comes from James Dickinson, commander of the U.S. Space Command. He said this during a Congress meeting. He told the Congress last month that they should be watching out for China's space station, that the technology could be used in the future system for grappling other satellites. But Professor Downe, I agree with you. One nationalistic comment might not reflect what the entire government think of China's space program. But what is true is that China has essentially been blocked from working with NASA or participating on the International Space Station. But Beijing has been clear about its desire, to involve in engagements in international cooperation in this field. Professor Yang, give us some example of such cooperation that has already been underway.
Actually speaking, the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs, or UNOSA, has already worked closely with our China Manned Space Agency to raise the proposals for the joint experiments on board China's space station. So 9 experiments from 17 countries has already been chosen, and sooner or later they will be brought to the station by the Tianzhou cargo ships and performed in the station. So we've already seen this happen. And actually speaking, we have a very close cooperation with Europe and Russia for many years. For instance, our astronauts were trained in Moscow, in Russia, several decades before. And also, that we get the telemetry support from the European Space Agency. So we have this kind of cooperation. And also, as I've mentioned, we have joint experiments on board the China spacecraft. So in the future, it is also possible. We've already seen that the European astronauts, Samantha, and also other European astronauts were trained in China. So it is possible for them to visit China's space station via the Shenzhou spaceship. And technically speaking, it is also possible in the future to have a visit of the foreign spacecraft to China's space station, because we use endogenous peripheral assembly system, or the APAS. So it follows the international standard. Only a slight change needed for them to adapt with China's docking and relative measurement system. And so it is not very difficult for other countries to have this kind of modification for either their manned spacecraft or a cargo ship to visit China's space station. Finally, it is possible for the future to have another country made a module and to be a permanent part of China's space station. I also hope that this can happen in the future.
In what areas, though, Professor Parker, do you see the kind of cooperation that emerges the most effective, the most beneficial?
That's a very good question. As Professor Yu Guang said, I mean, there's a whole series of different kinds of experiments, internationally constructed experiments with many international partners in many countries. If you look at the list of experiments currently approved for use in the science modules that are going to be added onto the Chinese space station, they cover a wide range of countries, not just in Europe, including countries like France and Germany and Switzerland even, and Sweden and countries like that, but also Vietnam and countries in Southeast Asia and India. And so it's very international in that respect. And there's another call that's just gone out for yet more ideas for new collaborations internationally for experiments on the Chinese space station. Now, the kinds of things you can do in space, of course, it's all to do with microgravity and the new technologies that can benefit from microgravity that you can test and develop out in space. It's things to do with studying our own space environment outside of the space station, and astrophysics missions and all sorts of high energy physics experiments. So there's all sorts of different kinds of activities, and these are similar, frankly, to what's been done in the past on the International Space Station. So there's no, currently that I'm aware of, game-changing new developments that stick out, particularly from what I've seen of the list of current experiments. But this is the way science goes. It's usually incremental. You work on the shoulders of the giants to move forward, and this is the way that science normally goes. Sometimes you do have a tremendous breakthrough, and of course that's extremely exciting. But I think the plans are solid and good. There's 2 science modules coming in, and I think that's going to be extremely important for a whole series of different fields of research, from medicine, biotechnology, manufacturing in space as well, 3D printing, all sorts of different things that are planned. And that's extremely exciting from my perspective. But for me, as an astrophysicist, I'm super excited by the Chinese space station telescope that's going to go up. It's a 2-meter class telescope, similar to the Hubble Space Telescope, but with a field of view that's 300 times larger, with an enormous optical and UV camera. So this is, for me, a very, very exciting development, and I'm getting involved in 1 or 2 projects I will do with that. So that's my personal interest.
Oh, that sounds exciting. And then comes the question, right, Professor Dunham, will China and the U.S. work together? in space? Because we earlier mentioned the NASA Administrator Bill Nelson expressed the willingness to look at China as a partner in space. Will that happen in the near future?
I think ultimately the answer has to be yes, but I don't know if it will be the near future or not. I think that we're sort of reliving the 1960s, and you may have to have the race to the moon before you have the cooperation. And I think right now, in terms of the politics in the United States, there's much more interest in playing up the danger of China getting ahead of the United States in, quote, the space race than saying, let's cooperate. I think Bill Nelson wants both. I mean, he's been in space. He was a senator. He was a senator who went into space, and I think he really does understand the science and the potential for cooperation. But he also understands politics, having been a senator for many decades. And I think that right now there's just not much to be gained, especially funding, by saying, well, let's cooperate with the Chinese on this. Just like with climate change, there's more to be gained if you push for conflict than if you push for working together.
And Professor Yang, how do you say to the criticism that sometimes China's space program is too, quote unquote, secretive and not open enough, therefore it's banned from, participating on the International Space Station?
Well, that actually speaking, from my personal opinion, I think the China space program is already transparent enough. You see that every time I attend the live coverage on CGTN of the launch, of the docking, of the return of the China spaceship, and also the soft landing of the lunar probe, the landers, and also the Zhurong rover. So I think that China is open to the whole world and willing to cooperate with any country, including the United States. So currently speaking, it is the decision of the United States, especially because they are restricted by the Wolf Amendment. So currently speaking, it's quite difficult for them to cooperate with China. But China is already have very good cooperation with other countries.
Professor Delman, your thoughts on this? Is there anything that China can do better?
Well, right now, I think that it is to continue to get the space station ready, and then get moving with the experiments. I mean, in terms of doing better, I just think it would be communicating to the world, and I think the more that it is an era in terms of cooperation rather than nationalistic rhetoric, the more likely that other nations in the world will be cooperative. I have to say, so far, that the Chinese Space Agency has done a good job, and I think that when you look at the coverage this time, so much of it was either neutral or admiring of the accomplishments. So, considering that a lot of the coverage of China around the world tends to be neutral at best to negative, I think that this was an accomplishment that the coverage overall was quite neutral to a bit positive.
And now the International Space Station is set to retire, right? Officially is approved to operate through December 2024, and an extension to 2028 might seem likely, but then it might be retired. What kind of bearing might that have on China's space station, Professor Parker, if there will be any?
Yes, this is a very important issue, and I think one of the reasons why we're seeing talk now of an extension of the International Space Station beyond its nominal lifetime and deorbiting perhaps in 2024 is the realization that China's now entered the scene perhaps a little quicker than many nations might have expected in demonstrating solid capacity with a new space station, spanking new, with incredible new technologies, more efficient solar panels on the International Space Station, more efficient ways of generating electricity and recovering water, and fantastic. I mean, even looking at the way the docking happened, it takes 2 days to dock with the International Space Station. It took about 8 hours through BIDO technology, etc., to dock. And even the return to Earth just the other day with the 3 taikonauts was done in a more guided way that's been possible before. So there's lots of new, even the ion drives that China solved this issue of ion drive technology over 10 years through some kind of magnetic confinement situation with these ion drives, so it doesn't destroy the engine itself, is a tremendous advance. So lots of new technologies have been demonstrated, and once the International Space Station perhaps is deorbited or is no longer there, then what's left for the international community? You have this impressive new Chinese space station available. It could become the only game in town. If the only game in town, you're the town that people want to go and visit and drink there, and visit the restaurants and shops and things. And so if you become that entity which is unique, then of course that gives you tremendous influence in certain directions. So I think the America in particular will be looking at this very carefully, and I know there's talk of even commercial space stations taking over in the future, and there's been a huge amount of money and effort put into commercialization of space, but also into the this space tourism thing that we've been hearing so much about from Elon Musk and Richard Branson and Jeff Bezos. So that's another aspect that's developing quite rapidly.
Yeah, talking about that, space tourism. Professor Dunham, we have to talk about this. There's recently been this explosion of interest in commercial space traveling. We've got Elon Musk Inspiration 4 by SpaceX and Virgin Galactic, Blue Origin. What do you think is suddenly fueling all this investment and interest in commercial space sector?
Well, I think number one, there is some demand for people who want to go up and are willing to pay huge amounts of money. There are a lot of very rich people in the world, and a lot of rich people who want to be able to say, I flew into space. Secondly, I think that this is a lost leader in terms of the bigger missions of these different companies. I mean, they are thinking big about things like commercial space stations and commercialization of space. And any attention that they give, that they get right now, will help them, I think, in terms of raising money and raising their profile. So I do think that when it comes to the world outside of China, a lot of the story in the next few years will be private ventures versus governments. And to see, I am curious in the US because there's been so much more happening on the private sector part than the US government part through NASA, just to see which way it goes in the next few years.
Yeah, Professor Parker, how do you look at the impact of, commercial space endeavors on government-led space research programs? Will there be some sort of impactful effect?
I think so. I mean, you look at the what Elon Musk has done in his missions and his big vision and plans for the future, including one would say the colonization of Mars, is when you look at the space, the astronauts that went up to the space station in their spacesuits, even that looked like it was something out of Star Trek. You think of astronauts have got all this gear on and there's all these tubes and pipes and widgets sticking out everywhere. Suddenly you look like you're in a Formula One racing car. In a brand spanking white Zen-like interior. I mean, for me, this is almost like science fiction when people see this, but this is the future, and there's tremendous opportunities. And I think, it's a public-private partnership way, with these big billionaires with these tremendous resources. And some of the developments are coming out, some of the technologies, being able to land, your expended rocket back on a moving platform or, in the water. And do this kind of thing is amazing. So new technologies are being developed that maybe wouldn't have happened so quickly if it was purely in the hands of governments. If there's not a war or conflict to generate innovation, which is what usually happens, then you do it through competition. And I think there's a competitive aspect of these commercial endeavors, coupled with, the state actors that still need to be engaged and involved, that together, I think you might make more and I think, Professor Dunham was right when he said, these space tourism is lost leaders to a much bigger behind the scenes goal for what these, especially Elon Musk, I must say, is planning. And for that's exciting, and it will be interesting to see where this goes in the future. From the China side, they've got a very impressive current domestic space program as a major spacefaring nation that's emerged just in the last few years in very quick succession, I think taking many people by surprise. And I think that's a sign of progress that's going to come quick and fast. But then, you do have these commercial things happening in China too. Lots of commercial companies and startups, for CubeSats and microsatellites and what have you.
We're running out of time, but before I go, I do want to talk to Professor Yang. Last time we've talked, you didn't rule out a possibility that commercial space traveling, commercial space tourism will develop here in China. Briefly.
Well, I think that the suborbital space tourism will be a very hopeful field for the common people, including those in China and outside China, to visit outer space. So until now, unfortunately, the orbital space travel is still a game of billionaires. So only a few can have the chance to have this kind of experience. So I think we should pay more attention on the suborbital space tourism.
All right, thank you very much. That's Professor Quentin Parker, Director of Laboratory for Space Research, Member Academic Senate, joining us from University of Hong Kong, and Professor Yang Yuguang, Professor at China Aerospace Science and Industry Corps, joining us from Beijing. And lastly, but not least, Professor Rick Dunham, joining us from Washington, D.C., a professor at Tsinghua University. Thank you so much for all your insights. And that's going to do it for this edition of Headline Buster, brought to you by The Point. Thank you so much for your time. We'll see you same time next week. Bye for now.
Goodbye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you very much. That was a great discussion. Yes. Oh,
Comments here.
okay. Okay, let's see.
How do you like today's discussion?
I really liked it. You know, this is really one of my passions.
Okay.
This is childhood dreams, you know, talking about space programs, seeing all those astronauts going to space, dreaming about me being an astronaut when I grow up. Okay. Coverage of Chinese media on space exploration, and it showed its transparency and hope to benefit the world community. This is Diaz Gan watching us on YouTube. Thank you very much. I think China is really putting so much effort into this, right? We've mentioned the concern that sometimes people think that China's space program isn't open enough, it's somewhat secretive. And they're really putting efforts on making everything open and transparent and let more people learn about China's space program.
Yes.
And let's see. Everyone can see with their own eyes. Yes, that's the interesting part about it, right? Everybody has their own perspective, and it's good to have all the different perspectives coming from different backgrounds, clash with each other, and have really great discussion. And hopefully everybody had learned something or get to see some new, fresh perspective.
You know, we have next 6 missions.
Right.
Yeah.
This is only the 4th of the total 11 missions, right? We've got more missions to come.
Yeah.
6 or 7? 6 or 7 missions, I guess.
6, I think.
Yeah. So in total 11 missions, we have 4 manned mission and 4 cargo mission, you know, to supply those oxygen, water, spacesuit, food, all kinds of supply for the astronauts. And we've got 3 missions to launch the Tianhe core module, the Mengtian and Wentian space labs. So that's going to happen a lot of those missions are going to happen next year. And we are now on schedule to finish that space station by the end of 2022. So a lot to look forward to, a lot of exciting stuff that's going to happen next year. If you're a space fan, do tune in to CGTN. We'll bring you all live coverages of all the launches, missions, all the way through. I'm a fan of it.
So I think there's gonna be a lot of live show for the missions,
oh yeah,
right?
that's for sure.
Are you going
that's
to
for sure.
join any of them?
You know, I covered several missions actually. The launch of the Tianhe core module, and then I covered the Shenzhou 12 mission, which sent Nie Haisheng, Liu Boming, and Tang Hongbo launched them into space. I missed the return of the Shenzhou 12 mission though. I was on another assignment in Sichuan province filming the special series on biodiversity. Yeah, but I had blast filming pandas there in Sichuan. But then I got back, I also covered the Tianzhou 3 cargo mission, which is cool. Hopefully I can cover more of them.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool. Any comments you want to mention, or?
I think that's a wrap. That's a wrap, right?
Okay.
That was a good show. Thank you very much. And thank you guys for watching us. Do hope to see you same time next week.
Okay,
Bye.
cool. Thank you. Can you cover the lens?
Okay. Like this? Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.